So if there has been significant damage done to the image of America and American democracy over the last couple of weeks, to what extent have today's events reversed that?
They help. And I think in different buckets depending on who you are around the world. I mean, if you're Canada or Mexico, as upset as you've been by the last couple of weeks and even the last 4 years, you don't really have a choice. I mean, you're going to align with the Americans because we're overwhelmingly powerful and you're overwhelmingly integrated with us. In Europe, there's going to be a honeymoon, but there's increasingly this sense of what they call strategic autonomy that Emmanuel Macron is increasingly driving, a reality that they don't believe that they can count on the Americans as much as they once had. And furthermore, that they're not as aligned in terms of policies on climate, on technology, which is becoming a really big issue, as well as on trade. And even with the honeymoon, and even with the Biden rejoining a lot of international organizations, multilateral initiatives, you're going to see the Europeans will have a ceiling on how much they can reintegrate or are willing to reintegrate with the Americans. And then you have in Asia, American allies that are increasingly concerned primarily by China getting a lot more powerful and a lot more assertive. And that growing reality, that strategic reality, as the United States and China have relations that are confrontational, were under Trump, are going to be under Biden, is really hard for them to navigate. So this is a world order where it's much more complicated than just saying, OK, Biden's in, and now we go back to status quo ante. There is no status quo ante.
We're just watching as well live pictures of President Biden's motorcade leaving Arlington National Cemetery, heading to the White House as discussed. We'll keep those pictures up for you live throughout. Ian, what stands out for you of the early executive orders? Are you surprised by any of them? Things like rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, will that go down well with allies in places like Europe?
Of course. I mean, leaving the Paris Climate Accord was literally opposed by every other country in the world. And given how divided the world is, it's actually hard to pull that off. So it was as much of a layup as one could imagine for Biden to say he's rejoining Paris, for Biden to rejoin the World Health Organization. And Anthony Fauci is going to a WHO executive committee meeting, I believe, just this weekend. I mean, leaving the WHO in the middle of a pandemic is pretty much an obscenity from a policy perspective. That's welcomed too. So you have a lot of those easy things to do. And certainly those countries around the world that are most committed to rule of law and multilateralism. Here I'm thinking Germany, I'm thinking Japan, I'm thinking South Korea, I'm thinking Canada. They're going to be much happier in this environment. Last year, we didn't even have a G7 summit. The G20 was kind of irrelevant. You'll see much more engagement, keeping in mind that Biden and his team have been around for a long time, and their personal networks with the leaders of most of America's allies are pretty deep and pretty long-standing. That personal connection does actually matter.
I guess it's sort of a controversial question, but is it really in our best interest, Ian, to return to a multilateral strategy on a foreign policy front? I think a lot of people would argue that President Trump did have some foreign policy wins in the Middle East, which didn't get talked about a lot, certainly confronting China. So do we want to go back to the way things were, confronting, for instance, China with our allies, which never seemed to work?
So a couple points on that. First, on some of the biggest wins, like on China and taking a harder line on things like technology, where we didn't really have a policy under Obama, Biden. Not only has that been successful and brought American allies together with the U.S., but the incoming Biden administration has agreed that it's successful. Same thing true with the Abraham Accords. You had John Kerry as Secretary of State saying it would never happen until there was an Israeli-Palestinian deal. That there is no such deal. There is normalization. Anthony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, they've all said, yeah, we want to support that. Let's keep in mind that when Americans talk about multilateralism, frequently what they're talking about is not surprising or embarrassing allies, not tweeting suddenly when your own team doesn't know what the hell you're doing, and instead sitting down in a room with them and saying, OK, here are our perspectives, and we're the most powerful country, so we're going to do things the way we want. It's not as if the Biden team are truly multilateralists, but they do believe that American-led international architecture tends to redound more to American interests than leaving that architecture. We're the ones that created the World Health Organization, after all. We're the ones that created the World Trade Organization, after all. So there is a belief that those institutions actually benefit. Multinational corporations that are the wealthiest ones are based in the United States.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.